Hey family, this is David Mahan, Policy Director here at CCV. This is what's coming up on this episode of The Narrative.
Then I think a lot of times, I think a lot of Christians, we love the Jesus flipping the tables.
Yeah.
But we're missing why he was flipping the tables. And I just want to ask sometimes, is this issue table flipping worthy?
Right.
And not every John Gruden saying something really racist and not being allowed to make multi-millions of dollars anymore on top of the millions of dollars he's already made coaching an NFL football team is not table flipping worthy for us, and it creates it harms our bigger cause. Always honest, often blunt, and never afraid. This is The Narrative. I'm Center for Christian Virtue President Aaron Baer, here with my co-host David Mahan. We are going to be wrapping up this volume on Marxism here. I'll tell you, when we decided to go down this path, this was one that I'd been really wanting to dive into because of some things I'd been reading, and we've had some really unbelievable guests over this volume. And I'll say we were actually hoping, we were thinking about doing one more episode with another guest. But we've had especially these last few speakers we've had have done such a great job of really bringing into focus the scope of Marxism, which is what we wanted to do. Really, when we decided to do this conversation on Marxism, that was my heart. Was I wanted to make the scope of Marxism real to your average person, especially your average churchgoer, because so often when we're talking about things like communism or Marxism or socialism, whatever you want to call them, it feels either something really abstract or really intellectual, but it doesn't really connect with the day to day. And I'm just grateful for the guests that we've had on this in this volume that have really helped bring into full picture why so many people are so concerned about things like communism. And so we've decided, look, we don't want to make content for the sake of content. We've decided we want to make sure we're bringing good things here to you, and we felt like this is the right time for us to wrap this volume. So I want to bring in my co-host here, David Mahan, our policy director. David, just initial thoughts, about when we came into this volume and where we are today.
Yeah, in a word, fascinating. I got a lot out of all of them. Gonzalez, just talking about Mike Gonzalez, just talking about what socialism looked like, in Cuba. Mm-hmm. I think, as we listen to so many of these guys, brilliant guys, Carl Truman, talking about, his book, The Rise of the Modern Self, and then Kangor, and the devil, and Karl Marx talking about some of, kind of the spiritual / demonic / rebellious undertones, underpinnings of Karl Marx. Absolutely fascinating. What it left me with, though, Aaron, is that, as I read even Truman's book and I'm looking at how Rousseau grew up and how his relationship with his father, or the lack thereof, and kind of his laissez-faire, and then, how Marx grew up. We can intellectualize all of this stuff amongst 35 to 50, 60-year-olds, and we just keep going down this slippery slope. But even with these men that we're studying, Freud, Marx, Rousseau, all these guys, to find out really what made them tick, we had to look at how they grew up. And I feel like it just left me thinking, as somebody who's been working with kids for 20-some years, we have to do a better job of discipling the next generation on biblical worldview, because they are receiving the worldview of so many different twisted men, through public education, unfortunately through churches that just don't know better, through pop culture, entertainment, and parents have no idea that these worldviews are getting pumped in there, and the effects that it's having. And it just kind of left me like, wow, we've got to do a better job with the next generation.
Yeah, I think the Truman conversation and the Truman book in particular is one that really kind of connects all the pieces. I remember saying this too about Rod Dreher's book, Live Not by Lies. But you kind of see the when you really start to understand the scope of communism, of Marxism, and you read the history of these folks, you start seeing all these pieces in the modern world click together that seem like they don't have anything to do with each other. Right. Why is it at the same time we see transgender ideology raging, we see the critical race theory things going on, and we see a lot of this the conversations around environmentalism and all these different things happening all in culture at once that seem kind of sporadic but seem radical. The defund the police movement, all right. of these different things. And when you really, I think what Truman did really well in his book, but also that gets connected in what Mike Gonzalez talked about and what Arthur Milik talked about in terms of when you're seeing communism in effect in actual countries, is you see the totality of how these things all connect. And to your point, David, about children and about not just children, but how all of these sort of early communist thinkers, what they all had in common. And this was the thing, I think, for me, when I think about what am I going to take away most from this when I think about communism, is that as much as communism is a worldview unto itself, it's really an anti-worldview. You know what I mean? It's taking what is in natural law, what we would understand in God's created order. I love. My wife said this yesterday on an interview that she was doing with the Colson Center for Christian Worldview. A biblical worldview. All a biblical worldview is seeing the world as it truly is. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it's not necessarily this thing that is. Having broad theology and all. It's just God created the world, and it's seeing the world through His defined truths. Right. And so much of what communism is, when you read who Marx was, when you read about Nietzsche, and you read about you mentioned Rousseau, or some of these other broad, really communist influence, and you see who these people are today that are pushing for communism. They just these communist ideals, they just want to break the status quo. They don't really have anything they want to replace it with. They want to defund the police and close the prisons, but there's no answer to what do we do with people who do wrong then, right? Yeah. They want to be feminists, but they also say anybody's a woman, so there's they have no answer for how do we protect women who are vulnerable. Right. And that's the thing as I think about communism from here, it's really. In some ways, it's a really complicated ideology. In other ways, it feels a little bit childish. And you mentioned these people come out of kids of just whatever you're for, I'm against, and I want to tear it down.
Right, and that's the point that I'm trying to get at. Just to give you an example, Ruth Edmonds, here at CCV, she sent me something to look at, to read, and I just looking at the title, the headline. In my spirit, I felt division. Like I've read so much of it. It wasn't like, oh, this is division. I get that. But the Lord spoke to me through the Holy Spirit. Division. That's what this is. We can break down all the worldviews and everything, but I think the simplicity of it is we're going to pit one group of people over the next group of people. And when we do so, we cut off certain voices that are so necessary for the proper development of children. And mindsets are formed. It brings me to John chapter 8, where Jesus is talking, to folks, and he says, "Why can't you hear my words?" We all seem to be children of Abraham, but yet, I went before the Father. He gave me, what to speak to you, but yet you want to kill me because you are of your father, the devil. When he's talking about of your father, he's not just talking about, being born of the devil. He's talking about who speaks into your life, who's the one that shapes your worldview, your perception, the lens through which you see the world. Who's shaping that on a daily basis? These are very simplistic concepts. It's who's ever speaking and getting into your ear gates, your eye gates. They are shaping how you see everything and what you are able to either receive or not receive. So listening to this series has just raised an awareness in me and a heightened need to speak to young people. You got me down here at the State House working with these old folks all day. And but last week I had such a blessed opportunity, 2 nights, to be able to speak to young adults. And man, that meant so much to me, especially after this series. Yeah, to be able to answer some questions and refocus them and give them answers to why things are the way they are.
Well, and David, I want to go down a wide rabbit trail here with you real quick. You said division, and I thought about this. I was thinking about you just the other night. And no, I know that's a dangerous thing. And because I think you're right. I think you look at what the modern sort of communist movement, or just it's not. I wouldn't say most people. I think today, especially on the left, that are pushing. That are on the left don't realize they're pushing communist ideals. They're not like well-groomed, informed folks. They've just it's the water they've swum in. You've come up through the university system. Again, it's what we always talk about. Why it's so. I still love what Ian Rose said in our previous volume about critical race theory. It's shadow boxing. The minute you think you're grabbing onto something or you're hitting something, they're saying, "Oh, that's not critical race theory."
That's right.
Folks don't realize what they're doing when they're doing it. But I think one of the big things about what the modern communist ideology in America does is it divides, right? It's just what you're for, I'm going to want to tear down. And I think we see that very evidently on the left today. And I think, again, that's one of the things that I'm walking away from this. However, I want to, you've been talking around CCV, in our policy team meetings and in so many things about division and about how, it's one of the reasons why, our name is Center for Christian Virtue. When I think about Christian virtue in our name, it tells me it's not just important about what we stand for, it's how we stand for it matters too. That I'm seeing that same spirit of division. We have seen it. It's not going to surprise people, but I'm seeing it very evidently on the right too.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And there was a really good example of this week. And if you don't mind, and I know I'm going to ask you, don't completely check out here on me because it has to do with football and the NFL. And I know how tiresome that is to you. But I just, if I was still a writer, I used to write op-eds and opinion pieces all the time. And we just kind of run out of time now. Got to keep you in line. But if I was still, I'd write an editorial on this, but I don't have the time and I can just rant on it on the narrative with you. But did you see the news about the Las Vegas Raiders coach, John Gruden? Did you see this at all?
I did not.
Okay, see, of course not. All right, so for those of you who don't live under a rock, literally, it was the biggest news ever. John Gruden was coach of the Las Vegas Raiders. He'd coached, won a Super Bowl with the Tampa Bay Bucks back in the early 2000s. Had been on ESPN, one of the commentators on Monday Night Football for a number of years. Big deal guy, big deal coach. He was fired pretty quickly this week because some emails leaked out, and the nature of how they were leaked is very clear. Somebody was trying to pick a bone with him that these came into public, but for whatever reason, they are public, of him saying some very racist and very harsh things against gay people, using gay slurs and about the NFL commissioner. He at one point he said that DeMaurice Smith, the black head of the NFL Players Union, he said that he had Michelin tire lips in an email in 2011, Gruden apologized, all this kind of stuff, but he got fired. And the thing that's frustrated me the most about all of this is, as soon as it happened, predictably, obviously the media, he's got to go, and he goes. But then I start seeing people on the right, making this the hill to die on, to try to point out the left's hypocrisy. And, they were saying, John Gruden gets fired for what he put in a private email in 2011. That there was apparently like topless photos of Washington Redskins cheerleaders that he was sending around to people. He gets fired for what he put in private emails back in 2011. But this guy, this NFL player, is sexually assaulted women and he's still playing, and this guy beat his kids and he's still playing, and this guy did. But it's because John Gruden had some conservative ideas that he'd expressed in emails. He was criticizing players for kneeling during the national anthem, all this kind of stuff. Oh, that Gruden's out because this is all political and
right.
And it's one of those times, David, where I just got to say, like, guys, we don't need to win every battle against the left. Everything is not a put points on the board.
Yeah.
John Gruden said something that was racist. John Gruden, and he's not a. This is not my wife and I were talking about this last night. This is not the situation of some random flight attendant who tweets something racially insensitive as she leaves an African nation or an Asian nation and tweets it out, and it goes viral, and when she lands, the airline fires her. She's just a flight attendant. This is a guy that's in a very public position,
right,
that has the rare opportunity to make millions of dollars doing something that's entertainment worthy, and in a league that says they stand for something. He should be fired.
Right.
It's a good thing. And we as Christians especially, I'm just sick of us getting wrapped up in this game of, well, we have to make a point on this one. We can't just let the left run roughshod. This is gonna make it. No, actually, it's not any of that. We already won the game. Christ is on the throne. Christ is what we don't have to. John Gruden said something bad. We might disagree about all this other stuff, and we could be right about all this other stuff. But John Gruden should go. And when we start to try to win every battle, I think we hurt our political case. But I think more important, we hurt our witness.
Yeah, this morning I was listening to conservative radio, and I listen to conservative talk radio, and it gets on my nerves half the time. And I listen to NPR, and that gets on my nerves three-quarters of the
liberal
time.
Talk radio. Yeah, let's be honest with what NPR is.
Yeah, it's definitely not public radio.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. Right. So, but the Lord spoke to me. It's not just enough to be true. We have to be wise in the body of Christ. And when I look at the politicized conservative movement and the church, the wing of it's like, we justify saying stupid things in very stupid ways because it's true, right? And the truth will win an argument, but if it's not wise, it will destroy a relationship, even though it was true. And that's the hypocrisy that I'm seeing amongst the conservatives. Because again, you said you got to play this thing both ways, yep, right? It's very hypocritical to the next generation. And again, that's what that we have no legacy. There's no legacy in my family. There's no legacy in a church. If we lose the next generation. And this is what they are seeing. Daniel chapter 7, 25, just real quick. And I know, we probably shouldn't, go all into the scriptures this whole time. But you asked me what got provoked in me. And it is the word, right? I'm seeing what the enemy's doing. And it says, and he, speaking of the enemy, shall speak great words against the Most High, and shall wear out the saints of the Most High, and think to change times and laws. And they shall be given into his hand. The enemy the people of God will be given into the enemy's hand until a time and times, dividing of times. Just the thought that the enemy will destroy the body of Christ, just wearing them down. The next generation is being worn down by the enemy and by the saints.
Yeah. No, amen.
Through foolishness in the name of truth, but just unwise. I was on a call with a minister and some folks from his church, and I could tell who was speaking into his ear. I could tell you the commentators. I can tell you all of them, and I was right 2 out of the 3 I guessed. And I kind of baited him into something by talking about systemic racism, and he wouldn't let me finish. And I said, systemic racism, this, that, and the other thing. And I told him about Planned Parenthood and Margaret Sanger and, eugenists that they were. And, they were like, oh, yeah, that's just terrible, what they did. And I said, they created a system, right, against a group of people. And I said, and so in some ways, there are certain aspects of certain systems that are run by men who have corrupt hearts, right, that we still need to be concerned about in 2021. But before I said, however, he went off on a tirade, completely cut me off. When I agree with his standpoint, I just don't agree with his messaging. And this is what's happening today. And young people are seeing it. And I'm talking about college students. They're seeing it and they're tired of it. And when they hear truth spoken wisely, and in my case, from the word of God, is something that's drawing them. It's drawing them. I feel like it will draw them more even than the demonic stuff that they're hearing, the Marxist stuff that they're hearing, and the socialist stuff that they're hearing from culture.
Yeah. No, and again, I think with this place we're in right now politically, and I think one of the things that, again, I want to talk sort of spiritual, and then I want to bring it down to the real practical kind of realities of what communism and Marxism is doing in the country today. I think from a spiritual standpoint, we have to not look at every situation as a tit for tat, right? I mean, it is, that's you talk about. I think you used a big word that right there is wisdom, right? When you have the victory, but we're called to what we're told is a battle. You have to be wise about what are the fights that we're called to and what we're not. And I think today, especially with sort of the 24-hour news cycle and social media and all these types of things, it's literally a moment by moment picking which battle you're jumping in on. And I think when our focus becomes trying to tilt the scales instead of just doing what's right, we get off. I see this a lot with people that Christians that hate Donald Trump, where it's like, hey, I want to let's talk about this issue, and they're like, oh, well, you're such a hypocrite, you voted for Donald Trump. Yeah. And it's like, okay, well, let's have that now completely different conversation, and talk about that, because everything has to come back to him, as opposed to, no, let's look here and have this, and honestly, I think this is the point I'm trying to make here, back to your division point. I think we even got a good example of this today. We earlier this morning, David, you and I got to sit as our colleague Nalani testified in support of a bill here in Ohio, Senate Bill 181, that was the result of a Muslim girl up in the Toledo area who was disqualified from a cross-country meet because she wore a hijab. All of us, she was a public school student, all of us should be able to recognize it is wrong to disqualify a student for their free exercise of belief in athletic competitions, as long as it's not endangering them or giving them a competitive advantage. We could all recognize. And it was a beautiful day because literally the Muslim girl got up there and testified, and then Howie Beagleman from the Jewish Federation got up and testified. Then Nalani got up from Center for Christian Virtue.
ACLU.
Then the ACLU got up there and testified. And honestly, for those of you who know me and know CCV, there is no organization that I am more opposed to in many ways than the ACLU. Basically, everything we do here, the ACLU is trying to sterilize kids and advocate for babies to die and in abortion and all these I cannot stand the ACLU. I was celebrating and really happy to be up there to find something that we could work together on, and because as much as I care about these issues, I care about souls the most, and I think when we lose track of that, we get off.
Yeah, and that's real touching, Aaron, but I did take a picture to use it against you one day. I definitely snapped that picture.
Me laughing, yucking it up with the ACLU.
Yeah, this man is in cahoots with the ACLU, y'all.
That's right.
Come
that's
get
right.
him.
Go get him.
It was amazing to see everybody come together around those things. And the whole vibe of the room was different than what we normally see in those
Right.
in those rooms as well. Spiritually, for me, I think when we talk about socialism and Marxism, I think in one of the discussions I was talking about Jay-Z, in that I listened to so many messages that were straight up socialist, that were straight up Marxist. I didn't hear that though. I heard a spiritual undertone. Even then, when I was young, I heard a demonic undertone. Like when Jesus said, "Why don't you hear my voice?" I heard the voice of my Father, even when I was acting crazy, right? Because I was his sheep. I just wasn't following him. I feel like down at the State House, I hear that too. And again, we talk to a lot of conservatives down there, but I'm not always hearing the voice of my Father. As much as I can't stand Marxism, as much as I can't stand socialism, and I would never stand with the concepts of Marx and Freud and Nietzsche and those guys, sometimes when my conservative brothers and sisters are talking, I can't vibe with that either. And I catch it on both ways. And I know we probably have listeners that have read some of my Facebook posts like, that you sound like the other side, right? No, I'm with you. I'm a conservative. I'm with you but my messaging cannot sound like that of my enemy. And this is kind of what's got me alerted to the demonic move against the believer's opportunity to hear truth.
Yeah, and again, I think so. So when we're talking, I think where this connects back to communism, and why I wanted to start with, what I'm really walking away from this conversation is communism is an anti-culture. It has a spirit that kind of it at its core is just to destroy things that are. You know what I mean? That's again, you read about Paul Kengor talked about Karl Marx's upbringing. And, somebody who was a Christian then went to university and became rabidly opposed. Nietzsche's journey is not too different. A lot of these guys' thinking is they went down this path, and they, Satan inspired in them a worldview to just tear down. Yeah,
but not just tear down, right? Tear down by taking over first.
Tear down by taking over and creating division.
Right.
And that to me, when we're talking about when I'm thinking about how do we push back, and this is kind of a good place to segue into what do we do about this when our strategy of pushing back is using their tools of division, we're gonna fail.
That's right, because God can't be in it.
Yeah.
Listen, I just thinking of these interviews, talking to Gonzalez, as what happened in Cuba, all of the major areas of influence, government, family, arts and entertainment, education, all these different areas, in my opinion, are run by the far left. All of them, right? Even some of our churches, the church is kind of getting more and more run by the far left. How in the world do you stop a train like that without the influence of God? And we can't ask God. It's kind of like I always say about the pronouns. Pastors ask me, should we use pronouns? How in the world are we going to, promote a lie in the name of truth?
Right.
Right. It's kind of like, we can't use division in the name of being, a biblical worldview. And in the end, it's like the means justify the ends or whatever. And, in the end, we're going to win. And that's going to be great for God and raising up the next generation and religious freedom. But no, I think the means are important as well, because it's the means that we need God's hand in to allow us to win those battles.
So, David, I want to push on you for a second, because I want to talk about, because I think this is an important conversation.
Always pushing,
right?
On
Exactly.
always.
Right? but because and I have thoughts on this too. Someone, a brother or sister could rightly push back when we talk about division, of Christ saying, he did not come to unite, but came to divide.
Right.
He came with a sword.
That's right.
Divide, mother against daughter-in-law, and all those types of things. How do you square Christ saying that with the concern you have about division? What is a biblical view of division?
Well, the wheat and tare grows up together, right? And in the end, they shall be divided, right? Just like I just said, I'm talking about the body of Christ. I can't talk about what all conservatives do. I can't talk about what all black people do. My perspective is if we're going to win this, it's going to be the body of Christ being one, being unified. So unity is talking about the body. We're not supposed to be unified with everything. Right? That's the problem that the young people in the world right now, that's what they're hearing with this whole don't judge me, right? In order to be unified with everybody on the planet, I can't judge sin for sin. I can't see behavior as negative or positive. I just have to affirm everybody's whatever and their reality so that we can be unified and nobody would have contention. That's no. When you see somebody caught in sin, restore such a one gently. Right? And be careful that you yourself is not also tempted to sin. Right? And so this whole thing where we can't talk about anything being wrong because we don't want to push anybody away. No. Unity, we're talking about the body. Right? Yeah. The body should be unified.
Yeah, no, and I think that's right on. And I think, again, I hear a lot of folks use this section when Christ said this inappropriately. And I think, one, it's really important the context in which he said that, which he was talking about faith in, believing in God, essentially. Yeah. And that is the most divisive thing we can have. You either do or you don't. And the stakes are the highest stakes there could ever be. And so we need to be very clear about that. So when I hear Christ talk about that division, I think that's very different than the division that we're identifying. That I think a lot of times, I think a lot of Christians we love the Jesus flipping the tables.
Yeah.
But we're missing why he was flipping the tables. And I just want to ask sometimes, is this issue table flipping worthy?
Right.
And not John Gruden saying something really racist and not being allowed to make multi-millions of dollars anymore on top of the millions of dollars he's already made coaching an NFL football team is not table flipping worthy for us, and it creates it harms our bigger cause. Well, I want to just continue to sort of wind us down here, thinking about where do we go from here. I want to say one thing in particular. One of the other things from both the Truman book that really jumped out, but also this was a little bit in the definitely in the Gonzalez interview and in the Tim Paget conversation as well. Truman uses this term in Rise and Triumph, but I think it's when I think about how do we practically push back against communism and Marxism today. Truman uses the phrase social imagination. Mm-hmm. And what he uses it a lot in the context of what the left has done, which is they captured the social imagination and they kind of reframed what people think is possible. So now they have made it so that a 6-year-old boy can think it's possible to be a girl, right? They've made it possible to think that we should defund the police, right? They do such a great job of reframing the debate and making things seem possible that we're not. Again, 10 years ago, if somebody would have told us that we were going to be debating whether boys should be in girls' sports, I think about I've been working in public policy for over a decade now, and if somebody, when I was in Arizona doing this work, if somebody would have come to us and say, hey, you need to run a bill to say boys can't play in girls' sports, or hey, you need to run a bill to say you can't sterilize kids with cross-sex hormones, we'd say that's a waste of time. Who's doing that? Why would we do that? So the left has done such a great job of capturing the social imagination. And I think for us, and it's one of the things I think we're trying to do with the backpack bill, is we need to cast a better and a more beautiful vision for the future. And I know that's one of those things that sounds really abstract and really flowery and really nice, but this is why I come back to, we changed our name from Citizens for Community Values to Center for Christian Virtue. We need, we're not just about better laws. We're about a hope and a future in Jesus Christ. And if we want to overcome this anti-culture of communism and Marxism, we have to present a better vision for the future.
Yeah, and a better vision of who Christ is.
Yeah.
Right. And I feel like, again, that kind of gets back to what we're talking about with using their tactics. I mean, the devil's using a lot of, creativity. He has no creativity. All he can do is twist what God is doing. Right. And so because they want to destroy the family, they have to kind of take over. They want to destroy righteous education. So they had to come in and take over public education and develop the worldview of such young people. But I think if in the body, if we can get back to the place where we start preaching who he really is and that we're all made in his image and the marriage, being unity of a man and a woman and what that really looks like in representation, not just in description. But when we as a family, we've got the same divorce rates in the church sometimes. We've got the same STD rates. We've got the same teen pregnancy rates. Because we have the same diet so much of the time as the world, we end up demonstrating some of the same social ills and sin sicknesses of the world. And that's what I'm talking about when I say we have to represent him better. All of us, myself included, because we're going to need his hand to turn this nation. I am encouraged. With all of this, I am encouraged because we cry out so often for a revival. But revival is not necessarily going to hit, every 24 months, on the calendar, like we have our church revivals. It's going to hit like it always does in the scriptures when all heck is broken loose to the extent that we begin to cry out for his help again. And I see that, and I'm hearing that in pastors. I'm hearing that in marriages. I'm hearing it in depressed children, including those of the LGBT community. They are crying out, and the solutions of man are failing them. I don't know if that will happen before all of this Marxist stuff takes over, and we start talking about the fall of America, just like we talked about the fall of Rome. But I do know that people will begin to turn to God more the more we see persecution and brokenness.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think a few other things that I am walking away from this, and this is really practical, and I hope for those of you who have kind of gone on this journey with us through this volume, one of the other big things is the totality of the impact of a communist worldview that it touches. There's nothing that it doesn't touch. Whether it's family structure or sexuality or identity politics or business, sports, everything is politicized under and that you can feel that. I mentioned football, like it's everywhere. That even like you can't turn on TV without being just assaulted with a political ideology at all times. And so that's one of the things that with pastors, as I'm talking to them, is you need to understand this ideology because there's nothing that's not saturated in it today. And I think for us on the policy side, I mentioned backpack bill, and we've talked about it a bunch in this volume, and we're going to continue to talk about it because we think it's so important. But I think from a policymaker standpoint and from a informed voter standpoint, this is where I think we need to have a mindset for when we're thinking about the long-term future of our country. We need to have a mindset of reforming institutions. Elections matter, but elections only matter if we put people in place who have the courage to do important things. Things like the SAFE Act that we're working on here that says you can't sterilize children and put them on cross-sex hormones. Things like backpack bill. I think, and it was one of the things I loved about the wrap of our conversation with Arthur Millick was, him and his friends at the Claremont Institute. I might not agree with everything that they're doing or all of their core ideas over there, but what I appreciate about them, and I'm seeing this more and more, is people being willing to step back and question assumptions, and thinking, how do we change institutions, and not just how do we win this next election? How do we, pass this next nice pro-gun bill or pro-life bill that are important, and that we should do. But we have to recognize they're not going to deal with the core problem, which I genuinely, I'm leaving this. I think the core problem, obviously, the core problem is godlessness, and a nation that does not recognize God as the Lord, and hearts, more importantly, that don't. But I think when I summarize what's the biggest problems facing our nation, it is communism, and so we need to be thinking in terms of what's actually going to address that.
Yeah. We you mentioned the SAFE Act, and today we're celebrating. I think we were up to 23 co-sponsors now on the SAFE Act, and maybe about 2-3 weeks ago we had a bunch of representatives on, and just kind of hearing the dialogue, it was like we were about to do the right thing, but with the wrong mindset. And I said, guys, it was at the end of the call, and I said, man, I feel like we can either go into this real sheepishly opposing the LGBT community or LGBT activism, or we could come at this courageously and boldly to protect vulnerable children from exploitation and experimentation, right? So we have to have the right mindset going into this thing, that we're going to do the right thing for the right reasons, right? We're not just frustrating and opposing something. We're protecting people from exploitation and experimentation, and I think so many times that's where kind of we drop the ball in the church, is that we have a heart to do the right thing, but all the content and information we have makes us do the right thing the wrong way sometimes.
Amen. Well, that's a great place to wrap up this volume, David. Thanks again for riding this out with me. Thanks for all you do with CCV.
Backbone of this thing,
That's
y'all.
right. That have no doubt about that. That's for sure. And thanks to our producer Vince at Wessler Media. If you want to, it's I know it's hard to find talent like David, but if you're in podcast or audio production, look up Wessler Media, WESSLER Media. Also, thanks to Claire and Maddie on the team for their help. Booking guests, thanks to everyone who came on: Tim Padgett, Mike Gonzalez, Carl Truman, Dr. Paul Kengor, Arthur Millick. And thank you for listening to us. Again, if you're enjoying this, be sure to leave us a rating, leave us a review, like and share the posts on Facebook and Twitter, CCV Policy, and on Instagram. Those are our handles all across the board. And we want to hear from you on what our next volume should be on. There's a lot of different ways we can go. We've talked about maybe we do one on education, maybe we do one on sort of the sexual revolution. There's a lot of different directions we could go, a lot of different topics. If there's something else that you have in mind, we want to hear from you. But grateful for you riding this volume out with us. I hope you were as blessed and learned as much from it as we did. And we're looking forward to being back on volume 3.
That's right.
Of the narrative. We'll catch you then.